The magnificent headquarters of Harrison International Group shimmered beneath the afternoon sun, its towering glass walls and polished marble floors reflecting the elegance of one of the country's largest corporations. Employees hurried through the luxurious lobby while executives prepared for an important board meeting. At the center of the lobby stood Victoria Harrison, a 34-year-old billionaire CEO with long, wavy chestnut brown hair, wearing the same elegant ivory-white business pantsuit seen in the thumbnail. She had inherited the company after her mother's death 5 years earlier and was known as a brilliant but emotionally guarded leader. As she crossed the lobby with her executive team behind her, she noticed a man kneeling on the marble floor, searching beneath a nearby glass table. It was Ethan Carter, a 40-year-old single father with an athletic build. Short, dark brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard, wearing the same navy blue work shirt with rolled-up sleeves, dark jeans and brown work boots, exactly like the thumbnail. Ethan worked as an outside maintenance contractor repairing electrical systems in the building, and few people even knew his name. Just as Ethan stood up, an old brown leather wallet slipped from his pocket without him noticing. Victoria instinctively bent down and picked it up, intending to return it before he left. As she opened it to check for identification, a small, worn photograph slid into her hand. The moment her eyes fell upon it, her heartbeat stopped. The picture showed a much younger version of her late mother standing beside a smiling young man, while holding a little girl in her arms. Victoria's hands began to shake. She had seen that exact photograph once during her childhood before it mysteriously disappeared after her mother's funeral. Her mother had always refused to explain who the man in the picture was, saying only, "One day, you'll understand why this photograph must remain hidden." Since then, Victoria had searched for answers, but every trace of the photograph had vanished. Looking back at Ethan, she realized he had no idea what she was holding. He simply walked toward her with a polite smile and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I think that's my wallet." Victoria stared at him in disbelief before quietly asking, "Where did you get this photograph?" Ethan looked surprised by the question. "My mother gave it to me before she passed away," he answered honestly. "She told me never to lose it because it was the only picture, connecting me to someone who once saved her life." Victoria's breathing grew heavier. The luxurious lobby suddenly felt silent despite being filled with people. Deep inside, she sensed that the stranger standing before her was connected to a family secret her mother had protected for decades, and discovering the truth was about to change both of their lives forever. Victoria remained frozen, still holding the old photograph between her trembling fingers. Around them, executives, security officers, and employees continued moving through the luxurious marble lobby, unaware that a decades-old family mystery had just resurfaced. Ethan gently reached for his wallet, but Victoria instinctively held onto it for another moment. "Please," she whispered, "tell me everything your mother ever said about this photograph." Ethan looked confused by the urgency in her voice. He had carried the picture for years without anyone giving it a second glance. "She didn't tell me much," he replied quietly. "Only that the woman in the picture once saved her life when she had nowhere to go. She said that woman gave her hope, money for a hospital, and a place to stay when everyone else had turned their backs on her." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Those words sounded exactly like her late mother. Long before becoming one of the country's most respected business leaders, Margaret Harrison had secretly supported struggling families without ever asking for recognition. Even Victoria had known only a small part of her mother's charitable work. "What was your mother's name?" Victoria asked. "Sarah Carter," Ethan answered. The name immediately struck Victoria's memory. Years earlier, while sorting through her mother's private journals after the funeral, she had briefly seen the name Sarah written beside a sentence that read, "One promise can change two families forever." Before she could read the next page, her mother's longtime lawyer had quietly removed the journal, explaining that it contained confidential personal matters. Victoria slowly handed the wallet back to Ethan. "Would you come upstairs with me?" she asked. Ethan frowned. "To your office?" She nodded. "I think my mother knew your family, and I believe this photograph is only the beginning of a story neither of us knows." Though hesitant, Ethan agreed. Minutes later, They entered the private executive elevator while curious employees watched from the lobby. The ride to the top floor was silent. Victoria couldn't stop staring at the old photograph, while Ethan wondered why the most powerful woman in the company suddenly seemed more like a daughter searching for answers than a billionaire CEO. When they reached Victoria's executive office, she unlocked a private cabinet that had remained untouched since her mother's passing. Inside were several leather-bound journals, old letters, and sealed envelopes. With trembling hands, she opened the final journal her mother had written. Between its pages lay another faded photograph, the exact same day, the exact same people, but from a different angle. There was no longer any doubt. Ethan's family and Victoria's family had been connected by a secret that had remained hidden for more than 20 years. And the next page of the journal began with a sentence that made both of them stop breathing. If my daughter ever meets Sarah's son, it means the time has finally come to tell them the truth. Victoria's hands trembled as she turned the page of her mother's journal. The elegant handwriting was unmistakable. It read, "If my daughter is reading this beside Sarah's son, then fate has finally reunited two families whose lives were forever connected." The room became silent. Ethan leaned forward, unable to take his eyes off the journal. Victoria continued reading aloud. More than 20 years earlier, her mother, Margaret Harrison, had secretly volunteered at a community shelter where she met a young widow named Sarah Carter. Sarah had lost everything after her husband died in a construction accident, leaving her alone to raise her little boy, Ethan. Margaret quietly paid Sarah's hospital bills when Ethan became seriously ill, found her a safe apartment, and even arranged a stable job for her under another name, so she could rebuild her life with dignity. Sarah had begged Margaret to let her repay the kindness someday, but Margaret had simply smiled and said, "If you ever have the chance, help someone else instead." Victoria wiped away a tear as she read further. One final paragraph stopped both of them cold. Margaret wrote, "Sarah never knew this, but the company she helped me build with her courage eventually became Harrison International. Watching her refuse to give up reminded me why I had started this business, to create opportunities for people who needed them most. Ethan will never know that in many ways his mother's strength saved me as much as I saved her." Ethan slowly lowered his head. His late mother had always spoken of a mysterious woman who had changed their lives, but she had never revealed her identity because she believed true kindness never asked for recognition. Victoria quietly closed the journal and looked at Ethan with completely different eyes. Just hours earlier, he had been nothing more than a maintenance contractor working inside her headquarters. Now she realized that the man sitting across from her carried part of her mother's greatest legacy. "All these years," she whispered, "my mother was protecting your family's dignity, even after she was gone." Ethan nodded silently. "She protected ours too. My mother told me never to look for the woman who helped us because she wanted us to build our future through hard work, not gratitude." Before either of them could speak again, the office door burst open. Victoria's chief legal officer entered hurriedly, carrying several old property files. "Miss Harrison," he said, breathing heavily, "while reviewing your mother's private archives, we found something else." He placed a sealed envelope on the desk. Across the front, written in Margaret Harrison's own handwriting, were the words, "To be opened only when Victoria and Ethan finally meet." The two of them looked at each other in stunned silence, realizing the biggest secret was still waiting inside the envelope. With trembling hands, Victoria carefully broke the seal on the envelope. Inside were two handwritten letters and a folded legal document. The first letter was addressed to Victoria. She unfolded it slowly and began reading aloud. "My dearest Victoria, if you are reading this beside Ethan, then life has completed the promise I made many years ago. Sarah Carter was never my employee or my charity case. She became my closest friend when I was struggling to build this company. There were days when I wanted to quit, but Sarah reminded me that true leaders never give up on people. Without her courage, Harrison International would never have existed." Victoria's voice cracked as tears rolled down her face. For years, she had believed the company was built solely through her family's determination. Now she realized another family had quietly helped shape its future. Ethan opened the second letter, written specifically for him. Dear Ethan, your mother was the strongest woman I ever knew. She refused every offer of money unless she earned it herself. She asked me to promise that neither you nor Victoria would grow up believing kindness creates debt. Kindness creates responsibility. If this letter reaches you, I ask only one thing. Protect each other, because both your families built this company together. Ethan could barely finish reading. Every sacrifice his mother had made suddenly carried a deeper meaning. She had never hidden the truth out of shame. She had hidden it out of love. Victoria then unfolded the final document inside the envelope. It was an official legal agreement signed years earlier by her mother. According to the document, Margaret Harrison had quietly established a charitable trust using part of her personal fortune. The trust would only become active after both Ethan and Victoria discovered the truth together. Its purpose was simple: provide scholarships, housing assistance, and emergency financial support to struggling single parents across the country. Margaret had written one final sentence beneath her signature. A company becomes truly successful when its success changes lives beyond its walls. Victoria slowly stood and looked at Ethan. My mother trusted both of us with her greatest dream, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Then we shouldn't let it end with us. Months later, Harrison International launched the Margaret and Sarah Foundation, helping thousands of single mothers and single fathers rebuild their lives through education, housing, and employment opportunities. Ethan accepted a leadership role, not because he wanted wealth or power, but because he wanted to continue the promise his mother and Margaret had made decades earlier. Victoria no longer saw Ethan as a contractor or an employee. She saw him as family connected by compassion, sacrifice, and trust. One afternoon, they returned together to the same marble lobby where the old wallet had fallen to the floor. Lily stood beside her father, smiling as Victoria handed the old photograph back to him inside a new protective frame. "This belongs with your family," Victoria said. Ethan smiled. "No, it belongs to both of ours." As they stood beneath the sunlight pouring through the towering glass windows, they realized that one forgotten photograph had reunited two families and fulfilled a promise that had waited more than 20 years to be kept. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or power, it is the kindness that one generation leaves for the next.